Well, the Burlington Dismas House was really born out of another project that we were invited to contribute to, and that didn't work out. So we put our heads together and we brainstormed. And my husband and I had attended a training down in Memphis, Tennessee. We actually were the teachers of the training to teach prisoners decision-making and problem-solving, a program that we ran in Vermont for 35 years. And so many of us in this formation group that became Dismas Planning Committee had that experience and had worked with people in prison and knew quite a lot about their backgrounds. So the process was really, since none of us had been trained, we had life experience. I guess the best experience we had was knowing people in prison, and that they could really benefit from the community coming in and not even saying you're still part of us, but believing that they too were part of the community, even though they were locked inside. So we set up committees, and it just really gained momentum, as we met other people who were perhaps doing the decisions program or not, had never done anything like this before, were joining us. One of the women on the committee was a teacher at St. Michael's College, and she started a volleyball team that would go into the correctional facility in South Burlington, and they'd have volleyball games. So I was really getting acquainted with the committee, and there was plenty of work for everybody to do. And I think because I probably had the most experience of the decisions program and having worked with corrections, I just sort of emerged as the logical person to lead. And people accepted my genuineness, I guess, my simpleness, if I can say it that way, because there was so much I didn't know, and we just helped each other to learn and to figure out how to connect with fundraisers in Burlington, and we actually began some of our own fundraisers, which exist today. I mean, we're in our almost 40th year of doing a big fundraiser for the Burlington House, and almost the 35th year for the Rutland House. So way leads on to way, and what we didn't know, we invited people to join us with their expertise. Well, when the other project fell through that we thought we were going to be doing, that was much, much, much simpler. I mean, it was nothing like doing a residential program. So I went up to meet with this small group of people, probably 10 of us at that point, and I had the flip chart, and I said, well, we didn't get the grant for the other project we were going to work on for prisoners. Maybe we can brainstorm. So we just began to put all these different things up on the chart. And one of the things I put in was what I had learned at that training my husband and I gave down in Memphis in decision-making and problem-solving for prisoners. The chaplain, he was the chaplain at Vanderbilt. He started the first Dismas House in Nashville, and that's the model that we follow in Vermont. And so I said, well, housing, I know housing is really important, so housing goes up on the chart. And you could almost audibly hear, yeah, because most of these people had worked with the people in prison, and they knew they didn't have places to go or healthy places to go when they were returning to the community.
And that was Jack Hickey in Vanderbilt, who started the one in Nashville?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he started it with the students from Nashville.
Yeah.
The students were very present.
Yeah, students have, I guess, since its conception, students have had a big part.
Yep, and I think, if the houses haven't had students that lived at the house, some of them have had internships. I can think of Hartford having students from Dartmouth, and that's Hartford, Vermont, and the law school. So Castleton State College here and near Rutland has provided a lot of student interns. So it's been a learning experience, both helping each other.
And what about having houses near these institutions, like the law school and like UVM and Champlain College, really adds to what Dismas does? Or, in other words, what do you think would be missing without those relationships?
I think that they're peers. Many of them are peers because many of our people are younger folks who come to live at the house. I think it shows caring, community. I want to be here to work with you. Maybe they have dinner at the house. And they can help. Sometimes, it's tutoring and computer or just listening. It's all kinds of things that students can help to help with the Dismas experience.
Since its conception, has Dismas always been involved in helping residents get jobs as well?
I think it's different from place to place and how the job market is. And we may have contacts, that we can call on, or we can show the residents. These are places that you can connect with, contact. That's a big deal because, of course, we expect residents to be employed, and they have a program fee that they pay, and it helps them to get on their way. It's not a huge amount, certainly not like renting your own apartment, but it's what we do, and it's good to practice that. The person, well, I have to, there's so many people to thank, but most immediately with the Dismas project, I would say that my husband never said, "Oh, I don't want you to do that." When I wanted to visit a prisoner, it was like encouragement, there was respect. And before I knew it, he became one of my volunteers. The other person that I don't think I would ever have visited a prisoner and done the decisions and done the dismiss, the other person is a Dominican priest that actually went to St. Michael's College, Father Art Kerwin. He grew up in Albany and he went to St. Mike's, became a librarian, and then he, after 8 or 9 years, he decided to enter the Dominicans for the southern province. And it was Art that, well, he was friends with my husband because they were both history majors. And he told us he mentioned, he was visiting a prisoner once. And so that's where I got that idea. Then about 6 months later, he mentioned about a training they were doing in Albany. And maybe we'd like to get a group together. And so, of course, that's what I did because I respected him. And that's where we took the decisions training. And then it was that while I was down in Memphis, putting on the decisions training for volunteers down there, that Jack Hickey, who founded the first Dismas House, attended. And then we were at a big conference in Nashville. I forgot to tell you this before. So our friend Art said, you're in Nashville at this conference. You should go see Jack Hickey. So we called Jack Hickey, and Jack Hickey picked us up and brought us to Dismas House for dinner. So I would say that Art directly was the person that introduced me to my life's work, really. But totally unexpected. Yes, I studied education and sociology.
You can see the seeds of maybe your work here.
Oh, yeah.
Through that.
I was an elementary school teacher for a few years. And then we had our family of 4, and I had my hands full.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a family that was very faithful Catholic folks. My mother was part of the music program at the church. She did the organ and choirs, the adults and the children. And my father was working 6 days a week, so we didn't see him a whole lot. But he complimented my mother's faith. And then something pretty dramatic happened in my life. We had grown up going to public schools, and then I went to a Catholic college. And then, a little while later, we had something called Vatican II, the Vatican II Conference. The people are the church. I got so much out of that 4-day retreat. It made me want to live my faith more deeply, more directly. And so I just started to do small things like pick up some mothers who didn't have cars to get groceries, and they had 7 children, and you just wondered how they got through, not having transportation or anything. So there were little things like that I was doing to try to live the gospel more fully. And that's when our friend Art was visiting a prisoner, and I thought, well, that's certainly, I was in prison and you visited me, that's pretty direct. So it just was little by little by little. And I'm so grateful. In fact, I always send out a letter every Christmas to a lot of friends, and this year my letter was about gratitude. And really, I never thought my life would be like this. I didn't think it would be a bad life, but it's been an exciting life, and it's been a meaningful life. And the children talk about when we used to have the prisoners, before we had Dismas houses, we used to have the prisoners come over for Christmas Eve dinner, and they remember me playing the piano and the prisoners holding the little Christmas carol books and singing the Christmas carols with us. And you know, I'm just, because so many people have embraced the work of Dismas, you know, it's almost unbelievable, because we were not accepted in a few of the communities. We had court cases in 2 communities. But somehow we won the cases, and more people have supported us. So it's not just the prisoners that benefit, it's us as a community, that we feel more whole, that we're repairing, reaching out. There was one person who publicly was adamantly opposed to the Dismas House in her community. And we had invited her to come to dinners, and she never would come. And because she was public about her disdain, I went through so many years of, and I guess we didn't go in the same circles, because I would never see her anywhere. And one day I met her. I didn't really meet her, but I was coming up the sidewalk because I was going to calling hours at a funeral home, and she was just coming out. And she smiled at me, and she said, "Hello, Rita." And I said, "Hello, and nice to see you." And that was it. But all those years of separation, it was so big because it was so public, you know, at the time. And it's just hard for people, if they have such deep-rooted feelings, to make peace, because they still may not believe in what you're doing. You don't know. I can understand if there's fear, or they're afraid of their property values, or they just plain really believe these are bad people who can't change, who don't change. And I think humanity is complex, the way we're made up, and some people are much more rigid than other people. Their life experience is much different than our experience. We had some folks live with us along the way. One teenager who was pregnant in high school, and back in those days they used to go live with a family, so she came live with us. We had another fellow who came to live with us whose mother had died, and he was from the ghettos far away, and his principal in his school called us and said, you know, he was beginning to get into trouble. He was a good kid, but all his siblings had gotten married or moved on. His mother had died. So our family had a very different experience, you know, with people different than ourselves. Not so different, but different backgrounds, life experience. When I was first visiting in Rutland, and then we started the Decisions program, there were actually kids, teens, in jail that I knew from my kids' classes. They were already incarcerated when they were 16, 17, 18 years old. Think of it. I mean, it's no place to be. Yeah, well, I think the experience that I had before the prisoners were families single parent families, mothers with big families, no transportation, poverty, in other words. And I was very close with one family in particular, helping her to move and getting other people to. I mean, there were things that led up to my visiting a prisoner. And again, it was like, who are the poor? And it's not necessarily what I'm saying, like single mothers and poverty and all that. There's a lot of poor people. But I guess, I like people, no matter where they are. I don't mean to, just to make little of it, but I'll tell you a couple of stories. So Dennis was at the Rutland Dismas House. Dennis was a hardcore drug addict. He had grown up in a single-parent family, big family, down on Long Island. His mother worked at a convent, and so he was brought up Catholic. Somehow he wound up down in North Carolina, and then somehow he wound up in Vermont and broke the law. So he came to Dismas House in Rutland. And he was a great worker. He got a job right away. He went to meetings every night. He told me he purposely did not walk on the same side as the bars. He would make sure he walked home or walked to work on the opposite side of the road. And back then we used to go on weekends to Weston with the people living in the houses. And so we got acquainted with the Benedictine monks at the Weston Priory, where we had a large house. And he loved it there because he remembered growing up and the mother working at the convent, and it sort of was a connection. And so anyway, he was ready to leave Dismas. He was able to buy a small car, and he got a job up in Killington that paid better. So every so often, he would be down at the Priory for the Mass on Sunday. He got to be such good friends with the brothers that they invited him to come in for Sunday lunch. And about 5 years after he left Dismas, he got cancer. He was 47. And one of these times that he went in to have lunch with the brothers, he told them, and he asked them if he could be buried. Here I go again. In their cemetery. They have a small, intimate cemetery at the Priory. And they welcomed him. And so I got a call, maybe 2 months later, and he was at Logan Airport. He was flying out to Arizona, where his mother, elderly mother, was living, because he knew he didn't have much time. And I said, thank you for calling, and call me when you get out to Arizona. He did. 2 weeks later, his sister called me and said that Dennis had died. So she brought his ashes back to Vermont, and we had a service at the Priory for him and his burial. And it may not sound like, it just was such a celebration of community. What is it that the littlest things that we can do, really, when you think about it. It meant the world to him, Yeah,
that's a very, very, very powerful story. And I think a testament to that's community is Dismas. And yeah, that's fantastic. And it must have been an amazing service.
We had little prayer cards made with his picture on it, and there weren't a lot of people there. He didn't know a lot of people, but there were enough, Dismas people. His mother had died. She hadn't died yet, but she did die soon after. And his sister chose not to come. So.
Sounds like almost a second life with Dismas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I told you about my son Joe, and when my husband died, he had cancer. And they were going to start a new chemo, so they needed to build the fluid up in his kidneys. So we went into the hospital for a week. I stayed with him. And he just had these procedures for the fluid and all that. And so after a week, his oncologist came in and said, I think it's time now. His kidneys are doing better. So we went to have the procedure, and it was a Saturday. And the surgeon said it might take longer because there are walk-ins. There are people that suddenly get sick, so they have to take them. So anyway, the surgeon came back and he said, okay, your husband's been through the procedure. He's, anesthetized, and you can wait upstairs outside where he is. So then 15 minutes went by, and he said, we're going to be moving across the hall. They have some equipment over there that we need to use. And I thought, gee, that's odd. So we went across the hall, and really what had happened was my husband was not doing well. They thought he was doing well. And so during that time, he did not make it. And they came out and they explained what was going on, and that I couldn't be in there because they were working on him, I was with him the last 30 minutes before he passed, but I had been praying for 2 months that he wouldn't last because I knew he was suffering. When my son passed, it was entirely different. You love somebody and you want, he had treatment, he had friends, he had family, but we couldn't make the change. So it's a very different, death is so different, I think, in the way, it comes. Even though the result is the same. They're not here anymore. I saw an awful lot of drug addiction. It was fentanyl that, that's put into these cocaine or whatever. And it was nothing deliberate on his part. I'm sure of that. I'm positive of that. So my husband had a saying, life is a mystery, and we're dealt a certain hand, and to a certain extent we have a lot of control over that, but some things we don't. I like to remember happy things about Joe, and one of the things that the whole family, he was the youngest. We used to have this record player, what do you call it, console, I guess, and it had the mesh in the front where the sound came out of, and so I'd put a pile of records on when the kids were little, just I'd just have them on, and they'd be in and out of the house playing out back or whatever. But this one day, Joe was he was about 3 years old, and he had great rhythm. And I had one of the brothers' records on because they've recorded a lot of music. And Joe's going back and forth to the music, and he's saying, and the soloist at that time was a brother named Brother Gregory, and he's like, "Are you in there, Brother Gregory?" Empathy's such a gift. Well, I look at Dismas also as a safety net. Many have been homeless through drug addiction, whatever, not unemployment. I think that definitely they feel stability. They're not as frightened of not having a job or food or all the things that, and all the people in prison haven't gone through that. Some prisoners have had lots and lots of family and money and so forth and so on, but many of them have grown up in a lesser acceptable way in society. I mean, just to sit down at dinner. Many have not sat down as a family to dinner. It's like another part of my family, really. It's not like something I do 1 hour a week, or or when I had the full-time work. It was really so much a part of my family. The first person we had come live at the Rutland Dismas house, he sent flowers when my husband died. A small vase of roses. Beautiful, just nothing ostentatious, just this. And so I reconnected with him then, and he's done so well. He's worked so hard. Old cars, driving long distances to his work every day, and making it up into a step up and another step up, and not only raising his own children, but raising his brother's child, who, because his father had died, they took in his brother's child. He just got us off to such a great start and wrote on this. He was just wonderful. And he had been in foster care and foster care and foster care along with his brother. I don't remember exactly why he went to prison, but he certainly has made a lot out of his life and given life to these children, and with his wife and everything. We've had people live at Dismas House that have become terminally ill. They've had, hospice care, and so residents have experienced that, not often, but it has been a reality when someone has come that's older, gets sick. So there's a lot of different things that we handle that you wouldn't expect that we would be handling. We have people that stay friends with them afterwards, after they've left Dismas House. They get together, some common interest. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, well, thanks. There's a blinking red battery light with me right now, so I think that could be a good place to stop for now.
For now. I hope I didn't wander too much.
Not
No,
at
that
all.
was
It's amazing.
powerful.
Yeah, very.